Hi. So sometimes when we're talking about space, things just seem so unrealistically big, and it's really hard to think about, how big are things compared to other things, and what's the difference between a million miles away and a billion miles away? What are those things? So one of the things I like to do is read this book, How Much Is a Million? And this gives you a nice way to conceptualize the vast amount of distance and the size of things that are in space. Once you can really think about in your everyday life, what is the difference between a million and a billion and a trillion? So I'm going to read this book to you now, and then we're going to explore this topic a little further. How Much is a Million? By David M. Schwartz, pictures by Stephen Kellogg. If 1 million kids climbed onto one another's shoulders, they would be taller than the tallest buildings, higher than the highest mountains, and farther up in the sky than airplanes can fly. If you wanted to count from 1 to 1 million, it would take you about 23 days. If a goldfish bowl were big enough for 1 million goldfish, it would be large enough to hold a whale. Presto, 100 stars. If this book had 1 million tiny stars, they would fill 70 pages. Climb aboard. There you have 100,000 stars. If we take this 7-page journey 10 times, we'll pass 1 million stars. Let's do that later. I'm hungry. I'm thirsty. They must be 8th graders. How big is a billion? If a billion kids made a human tower, they would stand up past the moon. If you sat down to count from 1 to 1 billion, you would be counting for 95 years. If you found a goldfish bowl large enough to hold 1 billion goldfish, it would be as big as a stadium. If this book had 1 billion tiny stars, its pages spread side by side would stretch almost 10 miles. How tremendous is a trillion? If 1 trillion kids stood on top of each other, they would reach way, way, way beyond the moon, beyond Mars and Jupiter too, and almost as far as Saturn's rings. The bowl would have to be as big as a city harbor. If you put 1 trillion of our stars onto a gigantic roll of paper, it would stretch all the way from New York to New Zealand. So some of you might be wondering, how did they get these numbers, right? How did they get these figures? How do they know how tall those kids would be or how big the fishbowl needs to be? And so there's some really interesting notes from the author. So you can see here that they actually break it all down for you. So we have the taller than, right? And we have if you wanted to count, and goldfish, all of the different sizes. And they even calculate the tiny little stars for you that are on that piece of paper. The one I want to really focus on here is the if you counted, because I think that that is meaningful for us. So it says in this paragraph here, most of the numbers between 1 and 1 million are long and hard to say. Although the small numbers at the beginning are short, you will quickly move past them and face numbers like 69,828 or 711,499. And it probably takes you at least 2 seconds to pronounce long numbers like these. Let's pretend that you started counting from 1 to 1 million, that you did not stop to eat or sleep, and that you took 2 seconds to say each number. All right, think about that for a minute. You're not eating, you're not sleeping, you don't even get a bathroom break, right? And you're just going to count straight. There are 1 million numbers, and so it would take you 2 million seconds to say them all. 2 million seconds is the same as 33,333 minutes, which is the same as 555 and a half hours, which is the same as approximately 23 days, right? And they show you the equation there of how they converted that with the different units, okay? So there's 1 to 1 million. That's how we know it's going to take 23 days. What about when you're counting to a billion, though? In counting from 1 to 1 billion, you will encounter many, many numbers that take even longer to say than those you met on your way to 1 million. Try to say, for instance, 98,726,803. And then you can go on and on from there, right? If you're fast, you can say numbers that large in 3 seconds. Actually, if you pronounce all the syllables, it will probably take you a little longer than 3 seconds. But because some numbers like 22 or 4,500 are easy to say, let's agree that 3 seconds is a good average time for the numbers between 1 and 1 billion. So to count all these numbers, there are a billion of them, it would take you 3 billion seconds, which is the same as 50 million minutes, which is the same as 833,000 hours, which is the same as 34,000 days, which is about 95 years, right? And remember, it would take that long only if you never stopped for a break. So good luck. And then, of course, it breaks down the trillion too, right? And why, in the end, it would take you would have to have immortality to be able to achieve your goal, right? It means that it would take 6 trillion seconds or 190,259 years to reach the number 1 trillion. Okay, so thinking about that, there is a difference between 1 million and 1 billion, right? If we say something's a million miles away or a billion miles away, or someone's a millionaire or someone's a billionaire, if you wanted to count that person's money, you might be able to in 23 days for a millionaire. But for a billionaire, do you want to spend if you have 95 years left of your life spending counting their money? So there's a very big difference. So go on into this Google slide, and we're going to break down a little bit more about what do these larger numbers mean.